Now let's continue with our study on Information Security Controls, and we continue where we stopped for a short break. Let's discuss on ICT Security Policies. ICT Security Policies. Okay. ICT Security Policies, actually what they do, they set up rules, procedures and guidelines on how to use ICT devices or how to use ICT assets. There should be well put procedures, rules and guidelines. Zinatupa kanuni na taratibu ya matumizi ya vifaa vya ICT vya tehama kiusalama. That is a basic principle of ICT security policies. Any organization having ICT systems must put an ICT security policy in place. Unfortunately, you find most organizations, most institutions do not have ICT security policy. Forget about ICT policy themselves, because ICT security policy and the ICT policy are two different things. ICT policy, they set up rules, procedures and guidelines for the use of ICT assets or resources, but the ICT security policies, they put down rules, guidelines and procedures for the secure use of ICT resources. Those are two different things. Now, it is normal to find organizations do not have ICT policy or ICT security policy. An ICT security policy defines the goals and elements of an organization's computer system. It has to ensure that the core security principles of confidentiality, integrity, and availability are realized within the organization. Therefore, an ICT security policy has to make sure that it takes in place those three triads, those three pillars of ICT security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay. The success of an ICT security program depends on the quality of the policy generated. If we produce a good quality ICT security policy, then we can be a little bit sure that our ICT systems are well protected. ICT security policies has to be prepared carefully, and they have to take into considerations all the things which are needed in ICT security. This is a core functionality of an ICT security policy. Policy controls cost only the time and effort that the management team spends to create. There is no any cost of buying an ICT security policy. The only cost which can be seen by an organization is the time to produce an ICT policy, and probably the time to take experts somewhere in a comfortable place to prepare the policy. Because while during the process of preparation of an ICT security policy, experts must be in a place totally devoted for doing that job. My experience has shown most organizations do take their experts somewhere far away from their offices. Maybe they rent in a hotel, they sit there, discuss, and come up with an ICT security policy report. So the only cost which incurs an organization is the time and probably paying those experts to prepare that policy. That is the only cost which can be incurred. But the advantages we get out of preparing ICT security policy is far higher than the cost which we incur. There are so many advantages in making an ICT security policy. Okay. What are the basic rules in preparing an ICT security policy? Now, when we meet somewhere and discuss how to prepare a security policy, and when we start the process of preparing an ICT security policy, these are the rules which we have to consider and take in place. ICT policy should never conflict with laws of the land. It should be in line with the laws of the land. And that's why, for example, a country can formulate its ICT security policy of the country. You see, for example, in Tanzania we have the ICT Commission. The ICT Commission can produce an ICT policy and ICT security policy at national level. Now, other institutions down will prepare their ICT security policy, but in line with the national policy. They cannot go outside of that. So it should never conflict with law, and not laws about in national ICT policy, but it should go in line with laws governing cybersecurity of the land. That is a very basic principle, it's a very basic rule. Policies must be able to stand up in court if challenged. And that's why we say they should never conflict with the law. You cannot prepare an ICT security policy that is not in line with the law. If it gets challenged before the court of law, then it can be defeated and thrown out. So it should be able to stand up in the court of law. Policy must be properly supported and administered. All stakeholders in a particular organization or institution has to support the policy which is in the making. And we will see in the stages of preparing an ICT policy, we have an investigative stage and the other stages, which you take time trying to engage stakeholders while you are about to prepare the ICT security policy. And when creating it, end users should be involved, because these are the ones who will be using the ICT policy. Make sure you engage end users effectively. The guidelines for the effective policy as displayed there should be developed using industry accepted practices. There are best practices in preparing a ICT security policy. You should consider them all, and it should be distributed using appropriate methods. And make sure that all the stakeholders get a copy of the policy and understand the policy very well. They should read, they should understand it, and as experts who are preparing the policy, you should put a mechanism of teaching and educating them on the ICT policy. The policy must specify penalties for unacceptable behavior. There should be a penalty to take people into accountability. For example, you can set the password strength to comprise all the best practice we say in formatting password: capital letters, small letters, non-printable characters, and so on and forth. Now, if someone violates, then there should be a penalty for that one. A penalty is not necessarily taking someone to court, but even to penalize someone in order to be able to access ICT resources is a penalty as well. So if someone violates password rules, there should be a penalty for that. If someone, for example, uses storage media like flash disk, which are not as specified in the policy rules, there should be a penalty for that. Those things are usually highlighted or are usually spoken in the ICT security policy. The policy should follow standards. You see, it should follow standards. You cannot just write a policy out of nowhere. There should be a standard which it complies with. And as I said, there are many standards and guidelines which governs the writing or creation of ICT security policy. And the technical controls and the associated procedures might be established such that the network block access. Here, what we say, technical staff can transform or can it translate the ICT security policy into technical or technically realizable. For example, I was talking about the password policy. Technical guys, what can do is to make sure that if someone prepares a password which does not follow the standard, then the system cannot allow him or her. The system, what can say, just giving the user a message, your password does not follow our standard, create another password. You see, that is a typical implementation of the ICT security policy at a technical level, at a technical control level. Types of information security policies. Now there are types of information security policies. I tend to follow the Americans' NIST types of information security policies. They put in place 3 different types. They have what we call Enterprise Information Security Program Policy, which is at a higher level. Then for the issue-specific security policy and the system-specific security policies. But in practical aspect, we normally produce a policy which takes consideration features of all the 3 types of policies, as we see. Let's go through each of them briefly to see how it is, how it looks like. Okay, the Enterprise Information Security Policy. This sets the strategic direction, scope, and tone for all organization security efforts. Actually, this is the one which gives a clear picture, inatoa mwongozo wa swala zima la usalama wa ICT katika taasisi fulani. It sets up a strategic direction. It assigns responsibility for various areas of information security, including maintenance of information security policies and the practices and responsibility of other users. All these are being set at the enterprise level, at the enterprise information security policy. As you can see, this one is very crucial because it gives the clear picture of how ICT security is viewed, how it should be in a particular organization. ISP, Enterprise Information Security Policy, plays a vital role, as we can say, and as we have seen even in the previous slide. It plays a vital role in the importance of information security to the organization. Remember, this is a very important relationship. In any organization, we have strategic ICT strategic planning. ICT strategic planning. An organization must have its strategic plan. You see, now the ICT strategic plan actually can yield or give birth to information security strategic plan. We establish information security strategic plan out of the ICT strategic planning. You see, now ICT strategic planning are derived from the organization strategic planning. The organization has its strategic plan, which is more general, and use ICT strategic planning, which in turn will drive ICT information security strategic planning. Now, this chain of relationship is very important, and it should be reflected in the ICT policy, which ICT security policy, which is being generated. Now, when you go somewhere for preparation of ICT security policy, make sure you have these documents at hand: organizational strategic planning, ICT strategic planning. They will guide you in the formulation of information security policy. Okay, a properly prepared enterprise information security must contain the following: statement of purpose. We will see sample ICT security policies to see what they contain. It must have statement of purpose. It must have information technology security elements. The ICT security elements must be there. You see, it needs a need for information technology security. These are the important components which should be spoken of in the ICT security policy. You see, there should be information technology security responsibilities and roles. For all the departments and users or sections within an organization, each one has to be stated what is its role, or what is his or her role when it comes to ICT, and therefore ICT security. Roles has to be stated very clearly, and responsible people has to be educated what are their roles. You see, for example, what is the role of a user with his or her password? Do you share your passwords with anyone? Those are the roles which has been stated in the ICT security policy. Okay, how do we handle and manage our email addresses? Those are to be stated in the ICT security policy. You see, roles has to be stated very clearly, and the people responsible have to be trained and educated of their roles. And what are its elements? Its element of the enterprise information security policy is it should have an overview of the business philosophy on security. Each organization, each institution has got its philosophy, has got its core values, its core principles. You see, now all those has to be reflected in the ICT security policy. An organization dealing with financial transaction might see or interpret security differently with another organization which is maybe an academic institution. You see, now those differences in the business philosophies should be reflected in the ICT security policy, and that's why you can see differences in the ICT security policies from one organization or institution to another. See, information on the structure of the information security organization and individuals who fulfill the information security role. Those are the elements of the ICT security policies. Clearly, each element has to be stated properly in the ICT security policy and in a language which is easily understandable by all the stakeholders. Now, type number 2 of the ICT security policy, as explained by the NIST framework, is the issue-specific ICT security policy. This one provides a common understanding of the purpose for which an employee can and cannot use technology. You define which resources of the ICT are used by which group within an organization. This is what we interpret by this point here, that the issue-specific ICT policy should provide a common understanding of the purpose for which an employee can and cannot use the technology, on the how to and the procedures on how to use it. But to make it important, the issue specific should be designed in a manner to protect both the employees and organization from inefficiency and ambiguity. It should protect them from ambiguity, protecting an organization from ambiguity. By ambiguity, we mean if there are things which are not clearly understood or need certain legal interpretations. Now, issue specific should be made in a manner to protect an organization against those things. You see, those are stated in the issue specific ICT security policies. Okay, as we see samples of the ICT security policy, you'll be able to see all of these points which we have been discussing so far. Things which are normally addressed in the issue-specific ICT security policy, things like how the use of internet may be with specific issues, email, phone, etc., etc. All these specific issues are being addressed. And the most important thing which will take you probably time to address is the question of business continuity planning as a component of the issue-specific ICT security policy, because business continuity planning is becoming more important these days, because organizations have been subject to various cyber attacks, of which they need to know how to manage the institutions in case of such attacks, especially ransomware attacks, which has been affecting most organizations. Now, all those things are stated, and the ICT security policy should put a mechanism of how an institution should behave, or how should it conduct during disaster such as those things. Okay, and these are the components of the issue-specific ICT security policy. You get time to go through them in your readings. They are not new things; they are very common. That is, you state the statement of purpose of the policy, or the authorized uses, prohibited uses. As we seen when I was introducing the issue-specific ICT security policy, all these are usually stated in the ICT security policy. Okay. Three common approaches for creating or managing an issue-specific ICT security policy are three. These are the common approaches. Create an individual independent documents tailored for specific use. That is, for example, when you are talking, or you are addressing the question of internet or email use, you have to create a specific and individual document on that. And out of that document, which can be referred as an annex in the ICT security policy, should be taught to the respective users and make sure that they understand. You should create documents which can be attached with the policy as annexes. And in the main document of the ICT security policy, you will be referring them as annex. That way, we make even the entire ICT security policy document not too big to read, because human beings have a tendency of not reading documents which are very, very big. You see, now you prepare ICT security policy, which is brief, but it annexes or references some of the documents which are intended for particular users, not necessary to be read by each and everyone. That is the importance of preparing separate documents addressing specific issues. And many security policy will be unifying all the documents in one document as a point of references. Okay. Another type is what we call the system-specific security policy. System-specific security policy. This is normally for technical guys. An ICT security policy has to address what are the technical guys in the ICT security system should do. These are very, very important to be managed because they spend most of their time with the ICT systems. If we don't put policies in place to manage and guide them, they can even misuse the entire ICT system, and the entire security we are planning, enterprise information security, will be useless. You see, if somebody at the server room is not ethical enough, can spend time maybe reading all the emails of others at the server. You see, now there should be a policy which restricts even such an unauthorized and unethical use of ICT systems. But on top of that, we guide even these technical guys what to do during configuration of ICT system. And that's why we say the system-specific security policy provide guidance and procedures for configuring specific systems, technologies, and application. Configure things like IDS, intrusion detection system, firewalls, extension configuration, etc. And another point is to guide what to do and what not to do for these guys when they are accessing the system. That is very, very important. Okay, now I think I should give you time as a reading work, as an assignment to do your self-reading. As I say, referring to reading sources, some which are online, you should be able to explain these three. But what are they? They are ICT security policy models. We have seen type of ICT security mentioned or explained in the NIST system. We have gone through each of them, components of ICT policy, what is ICT policy should have, but what is the model of the ICT policy? When you look at any ICT security policy, you can be able to point out what is its type. Also, I said we best practice tells us not to prepare just maybe one type of ICT security policy. You can mix them. You make something which you call it's a hybrid type of an ICT security policy, which combines all those three types which were stated in the NIST. Also, looking at an ICT security policy, you can tell which model it is. A computer security model is a scheme for specifying and enforcing security policies. It is a scheme for specifying and enforcing security policies. And security models are implemented through ICT or computer security policies. We have three models. Some of the models, if you read an ICT security policy, you can find them, they mostly address confidentiality issues. then we say this is a confidentiality policy model, because mostly it addresses confidentiality issues. A typical example is that we call Bell-LaPadula model. Bell-LaPadula model. This is the name of an individual. Another policy, reading at it, you can find addressing mostly integrity issues. That is an integrity policy model, like the one stated by Bieber and Clark-Wilson model. You see, these are names of the individuals who explained about these models. But we have a hybrid model which combines the two, and we call it the Chinese wall model. And to be sincere, this hybrid model is the one which we do use time to time and in our everyday life of information and cyber security. Now, as a reading work, go through these models and see what did Bell-LaPadula, Clark-Wilson, and Chinese wall model, what did they write and what are they contained in it. This is your self-reading, so you have to make sure you understand it. Of course, it won't be examined, but it is for your own knowledge and understanding. Okay, what are the procedures for developing an ICT security? I told you there are procedures which you use in developing ICT security policy. We have 5 procedures: investigation phase, analysis phase, design phase, implementation phase, and maintenance phase. These are the procedures which we use or we go through when we design an ICT security policy. What do we do during investigation? During investigation, you should seek support from senior management. Senior management actually are very important as well, because they are the ones who will make sure even all the penalties and punishment for breakers of ICT security policy are taken. If the management is not in, the senior management is not in support, nothing will go through. And also senior management are the ones who will issue fundings during the preparation stage of the ICT security policy. Now, during investigation, you should seek support from such team. Support and active involvement of IT management. That was senior management, but even ICT management should provide you support. In some of the organizations or institutions, the question of ICT security policy is developed by the risk analysis or auditing team, which is different from ICT team. Now, these teams have to work together during the process of preparation of an ICT security policy. So there should be a support in that group as well. There should be a clear speech of goals. That is during the investigation phase. You should speak what are the goals of the ICT security policy. Partnership by the affected communities of interest. Participation by the affected communities of interest. All important stakeholders in the organization has to participate. All this information is done, is collected during investigation phase. So investigation phase is very, very important. Then follows the analysis phase. During analysis, we should produce the following: a new or recent risk assessment or IT audit documentation, documenting the information security needs of the organization. You should perform a recent risk assessment of your ICT system. This is where technical guys in the ICT come to place. Conducting risk assessment requires a know-how in technical skills, how to do it for the ICT system. There should be gathering of key reference materials. As I said, there are those documents which you should prepare and you need them during the process of writing an ICT security policy. These are in the analysis phase. The design phase, actually what we are doing is just to combine information we got from investigation, from analysis, and make sure that all the forms and the things are signed. You create banner skin, warning sign, all the procedure. All the things needed in the design. All these are being taken care during the design phase of an ICT security policy. And here, your team will be writing your report by coordinating all the information which you have. And after coordinating and combining the information, then you make sure that each and every document is ready, clearly stated. Those needing signatures are being signed, because the ICT security policies usually have policy statements which are stated by administrators, because each party has to be involved. Now during this stage, you will make sure that the policy statements are prepared and the administrator get to sign them, and every forms which are needed are being signed, and things are ready and put in place. Okay, implementation phase. We say the policy team writes the policies, you see, ready for publication. But what are the resources we have? We have the web. You visit important sites, for example, the electronic government site in Tanzania, or TUDARCO, normally issues alerts, cybersecurity alerts, and we believe they are the ones who are to give us guidance of the current threats and the vulnerability trends in our cyberspace. You see, there should be professional researchers, like information we got from NIST, we got from COBIT, we got from CIS, etc., etc. All of these are things which we do during the implementation phase of the ICT security policy. Maintenance is the policy development team should be responsible for monitoring, maintaining, and modifying the policy. Policy is something which, if you prepare it today, it doesn't mean you stop. That is the end of it. No, the policy should be something which is ongoing. You see, you maintain it time, and one you maintain, there should be somewhere in the policy document where you can sign that certain modification changes has been done in the date so and so and so, by somebody. You see, and someone signs in the policy document. All those things are done during the maintenance phase of the ICT security policy. Finally, is distribution, which is a normal process to distribute the documents. Each organization has got their own style of distributing information. And management, as I said, management of the ICT security policy, there should be policy administrator, there should be review, there should be reviews of the document, the procedures and practice. Those are components of ICT security policy management. What are the best practices in ICT security policy? Is to gather key references, develop a framework for the policy, prepare coverage matrix, in which areas does the ICT security policy covers, make critical system designs, and the structure review, approval, and enforcement of the process. These are the best practices in the ICT security document, and I've pointed them out in my presentation. and because I will share with you this presentation, we will go through all the best practices in ICT security policy formulation. Okay, now let's see what are the sample ICT security policies. The first one, you can visit the website of the Ministry of Utumishi. They have their ICT security policy. You can download it and see how it looks like. Or the electronic government EGA, they've got their policy. This one, actually it's a template of the policy. You can see it. It actually shows what the policy should contain, although it was prepared intending for government institutions, but at least it can give you somewhere to start with. They have their own guideline and guidance on how to prepare a policy. And another one, you can go to the university. I picked one university, for example, University of Sussex, which happened to be my university where I did my master's program. You can see their ICT security policy, and it can give you a hint on how to prepare an ICT security policy. Okay, now here is a group study work. Okay, it's a group study work. Go to the EGA templates for establishing ICT security policy template, which is available in this link. Now my questions are two, very simple ones. Okay, very simple questions. What do you see after visiting this document? Is the template complete? Does it meet all the requirements needed for establishment of an ICT security policy? Now download that template, go through these presentations and all the references which I've discussed with you, and see if it contains all the important requirements for establishment of an ICT. This is just a template which they provided, which guides someone how to prepare what should be contained in the ICT security policy. Now you as the academicians perform a critical analysis to see if it is complete, or if it contains all the requirements for establishment of an ICT security policy, and use that template, trying to construct an ICT security policy for TUDARCO university. Now customize that template, and assuming that you are at TUDARCO and being assigned an assignment to prepare an ICT security policy for the university, use that template and trying to formulate that ICT security policy. This one will give you a good test to see how well you have understood formation or creation of an ICT security policy. ICT security policy is one of the controls to information security, and I have spent more time explaining the general concepts and the ideas of ICT security policy, and you will see it is one of the important aspects to information security when we are talking of something we call defense in-depth philosophy of cyber security. ICT security policy is very, very important, and indeed it is one of the controls which we are discussing about the information security. Before we continue to the next phase, let's have another break for you to digest what we have just covered and get ready for doing this group work, of which, as usual, after you complete everything, encrypt the document with the public key which we shared earlier, and then you send me as a group. This one should be submitted probably at the end of the course, before we end this semester. I know it's a quite involving task, but it will give you some understanding. So you have much time to prepare it and produce a nice and high quality ICT security policy. Let's have a break and we will continue after to finalize or conclude our topic on information security controls.